Hi, all, and welcome to episode 29 of Plain Speaking Sanjiv. You may recall that a few weeks ago I spoken about some statistics relating to air travel safety in India. And I noted that in the last 10 years or so, fortunately, knock on wood, and thanks to the professionalism of all the pilots, engineers, air traffic controllers, airport staff, and everyone else involved, there has not been a single fatality of pilots or cabin crew on board an aircraft at all for the last 10 years. And in fact, for private airlines in India, there has not been a fatality since 1993 when they started. So it's been an amazing safety record, and kudos and full credit to everybody, all the professionals involved in this. The sad thing, however, is that in the last 2 or 3 years alone, there have been at least 3 or 4 pilots and cabin crew who've been killed in road accidents, either going to the airport, to report for duty, or on their way back from the airport. So purely on airport duty, going and coming from the airport, there have been 3 or 4 killed in Delhi and Bombay that I'm aware of. There may have been more, and it's really tragic because these are avoidable deaths, avoidable tragedies, and it's something that we've taken far too much for granted in India. The fact that there's so many people who are killed in road accidents. Now, this was brought home to me this morning when I woke up and I read news about 2 sets of migrant laborers who were involved in accidents while walking home to their home states and killed last night. 6 in Uttar Pradesh and 8 in Madhya Pradesh. Now, these were migrant workers, laborers walking on the roads and hit by buses, or in one case, I think they were in a bus hit by a truck or whatever it is. And this is happening during a lockdown when there's hardly any traffic on the roads. You can imagine, how bad things must be if in a lockdown with no traffic we can have these tragedies occur. And when in normal times we have about 200,000 people a year killed in road accidents in India. Now, these 200,000 people are not all occupants of cars or trucks, many of them are pedestrians. But the fact of the matter is that road accidents are responsible for the largest number of non natural deaths in India. 200,000 is equal to over 600 deaths a day in road accidents. Now, some have argued with me saying that, look, India is a large country, India is a huge country, India's got a huge population, and this will happen. Well, if you look at it statistically, that doesn't at all justify the numbers. India doesn't have the highest number of cars in the world. It doesn't have the highest kilometerage of roads in the world. In fact, on a per car, per motorized vehicle, or per kilometer basis, India has the worst accident rate in the world, the worst fatality rate in the world. It is something we've taken for granted, which we really should not be taking for granted. Now, let's think about why this might be the case. I think it's a combination of various factors. Most of it boils down to the same old curse that we suffer from in India, which is the chalta hai attitude. The chalta hai attitude, which coupled with the fact that we believe that we are kind of somewhat different, or somehow different, rules don't apply to us, rules are for stupid people, etc., comes together and creates tragedies such as this. Now, chalta hai is manifested in many ways. If you look at the roads themselves, we may now have some of the nicest highways or modern highways being built, but the signage on the roads, the lane markings, don't make sense in many cases. If you go on NH8, which is the highway, going to Jaipur from Delhi, and you look at the section between Gurgaon and Delhi, you have lanes that end at walls. So the lanes have been painted on the road essentially for decoration, because you cannot have in any modern country with proper road signage science have lanes that go straight into walls. So if you actually follow lanes, you'll be driving into a wall. You have other cases where you have zebra crossings or crosswalks painted on the road between two walls. There's no footpath on either side. There's no space for pedestrians to walk. But a zebra crossing is painted because I guess it looks nice and modern. Now, when you have that kind of lack of road signs going into road making in India, the actual hardware is fine, the road is fine, but then the details, the finishing touch, the last mile that makes the road actually perform at its best is missing completely. It is given probably to the lowest bidder who has no knowledge of what these road signs and lanes mean, and they just paint what looks nice to them. And we really need to change that, because it actually leads to tragedies and deaths. The other aspect, of course, is the way licenses are issued in India. My daughter went for her driving test and license last year in Gurgaon, and she was basically taught 2 or 3 things. One, to honk all the time. Second, to drive so that she is straddling 2 lanes. People in India seem to think that the lane is like a runway center line, that your wheels have to be on either side of it. She was actually being told by the driving instructor, why are you driving to the side of the line? drive right on the line, which means that even our instructors don't know what the basic traffic rules are. She was taught to don't worry what's behind you, only look forward, which means that don't care when you're weaving in and out of traffic, which is again goes against all common sense of modern driving, and so on and so forth. So she came away from those lessons really, taken aback and discussed them with me. And she says, "Dad, this is not how we drive, but this is how they're teaching us to drive." So you've got, uh, you know, instructors who don't know how to teach. Uh, that is that is when people are actually bothering to go and take lessons. You can still get driving licenses in India by paying a fee without even bothering to show up for a test. So that is one part of the challenge. So I've talked about roads, signage being terrible, the markings, etc. I've talked about driving, the trainers not knowing themselves what is good training or what is good driving, the fact that you can buy licenses, and then of course the fourth aspect is there's no enforcement on the roads. It is changing, it's improving now slightly in places like Gurgaon, where you do occasionally see cops pulling over cars for speeding or rash driving, but it's still very rare. And when you build modern highways like the Delhi Agra highway, and you don't have enforcement and you don't have proper oversight of how people drive, they become death traps. People are driving at 200 kilometers per hour and just killing themselves. It's just something that we need to understand, that you can't just build the modern hardware. The software has to come with that, the enforcement has to come with that, in order to make sure that the hardware is being used properly and not, putting people's lives at risk. And finally, the last aspect, of course, is the chalta hai casualness of all of us. A lot of the people who are killed on the roads are not actually, like I said, the occupants of the cars or the vehicles, but they're pedestrians. That's because even if you drive on highways, you see pedestrians dashing across, weaving between cars, jumping over fences, even though they may be a footbridge just a couple of 100 feet in front or behind. That is because of the attitude we have that let's take a shortcut. So we're taking shortcuts. We are cavalier about safety. We walk on the streets when there may be a footpath. We walk three abreast, chatting with each other, and then it's no surprise that we get involved in accidents. Because even the poor drivers, those who are doing their best, can't help it if somebody comes darting across the street on the highway and puts themselves in danger. So you see, there's multiple factors: institutional, citizen responsibilities, and infrastructural, that contribute to this calamity that we have of 200,000 people a year being killed in road accidents in India. So again, if you look at aviation, India is one of the safest aviation markets in the world. Kudos to all the professionals. We are world class. It's so sad that when you come out of the airport, it's mayhem out there. So perhaps if all of us can somehow work with our municipalities and elected representatives, etc., and lobby to get them to understand the urgency of addressing this. If in a lockdown we can have people being killed on highways, imagine the mayhem when it comes back. And the lockdown has showed us that if the government wants, if we want, if we citizens want, we can follow rules. People have followed the lockdown rules by and large very well. So why can't we follow rules on the street in normal times? So that's it, food for thought for all of us. Take care and see you tomorrow. Bye.